In the previous episode, after Narumi slaughtered Yoju and severed his head, at the same time a kaiju of the same type appeared and attacked Narumi and the defense forces. Unfortunately, the power of this kaiju was so great that it put Narumi and others in danger. But fortunately, when the kaiju was about to attack unexpectedly, Captain Isao with the number 2 kaiju ability arrived at the right time. An overpowering force killed the kaiju in one hit. But after that, Captain Isao was surprised that Narumi could wear an unregulated uni-organ. But a funny thing happened when Narumi looked closely at Captain Isao's face, and it turned out that it amazed Narumi and was so happy that Captain Isao had saved him. But instead of saying thank you, Narumi showed an annoying trait. He stated arrogantly that he could defeat the kaiju without his help. And not only that, Narumi also stated that all this time he could survive with his strength. Mr. Hasegawa was shocked after hearing the brash boy's words and dragged him to be taken for a medical examination. And after the medical examination, it turned out that there was something that made them surprised to find out. Narumi's genes turned out to have a 24% power release. That's a pretty big number for a boy his age, and their captain Isao was impressed by that pretty big ability. A fact, guys, to get a number like that, it's usually only achieved for a soldier who wears a uniform after training. There has never been an ordinary person who doesn't wear a kaiju uniform, but has a number like this. Then confirmed, if it turns out that with the results of the examination, Gen Narumi has a match with kaiju cells that is quite high. Captain Isao stated that with that means Gen Narumi has the potential for ichi kaiju weapons. It was the first daikaiju in Japanese history that had a toughness exceeding the number 9. And from the kaiju's retinal tissue, they made the oldest kaiju weapon a contact lens that was later called the ichi kaiju weapon. But they stated that even though the weapon was theoretically complete, they still couldn't find a suitable user. And maybe that's the reason why Gen Narumi can be called an abnormal person. And that's also the reason why he can wear unregulated uni-organ. Then Mr. Hasegawa looked at Narumi's bio, which mentioned that he had high academic and athletic scores. But because of his brandy and mischievous nature, he had to be expelled from school many times. And not only that, it turns out that Narumi is an orphan. Both of his parents died as a result of the kaiju disaster. Then Narumi asked them if it was over, because if it was like that, he wanted to go home immediately. But when he heard his desire to go home, Captain Isao informed him that the facility where Narumi lived had been destroyed. Then at that point, with the situation so desperate, Captain Isao offered Narumi to join the defense force. Narumi was a little surprised by the offer, and Captain Isao said that their goal is to eradicate the kaiju, and one day, your strength will be needed to protect the country. But again, Captain Isao didn't insist on it, because after all, it depends on Narumi. But again, Narumi showed his attitude saying that it sounded like they just wanted to utilize his power. But Captain Isao apparently didn't insist on it because after all, it depended on Narumi. Because according to Captain Isao, the defense force will accept anyone who shows ability and results. That's who will become the first Division Defense Force place. Mr. Hasegawa seems to be starting to realize Narumi's abilities, which is why Captain Isao has high hopes for the boy. But in essence, with the current situation and conditions, and given that Captain Isao has been captain of Division 1 for a long time, this would be the right reason. Because basically they currently don't have a soldier with enough ability, and Narumi's presence will be a new atmosphere, especially with his abilities. And it can be concluded that Narumi will make a big change in the defense forces. And after listening to what Captain Isao said about abilities and results, Narumi began to be interested in it. And in the end, Narumi applied for the Defense Force entrance exam that year, and he passed with the highest score in all sections. Both in the written and physical exams, Narumi's abilities were worthy of the best scores. In addition, at the second test stage, Narumi showed his ability to eradicate the kaiju. Despite having a strong, large, and terrible physique, at that time Narumi was able to eradicate them all and stood on a pile of corpses, which was also known that Narumi did it alone. And because of that, Captain Isao and several other soldiers who saw Narumi's actions were so impressed. And in the end, Narumi has joined the defense forces. And now we are in a defense force room. Some captains, such as Isao, Hasegawa, and even Mina, are there. At that time, it was discovered that there was an emergence of kaiju that invaded the city of Koshigaya, and a scientist explained that the kaiju that invaded the city were of the plant type. The kaiju have a very unique but dangerous characteristic. They break through the asphalt and emerge between buildings. But strangely, they do it at dawn. The kaiju are known to hide under arrest to collect nutrients. Then, its fruit pod emerged on the portion of the plant above the surface. So what pod fruit means is the shape of a drupe. It opens up and shoots its seeds into the air. That's pod fruit when it first appears in the morning. And after that, it turns into this shape. It's not too different, just a little peeled off at the bottom. And once the fruit gathers enough nutrients, the light will trigger it to open, and that will cause it to release and spread its seeds. Then the scientists showed a similar event due to the damage caused by the plant-type kaiju. At that time, it was in '66, and in Sendai in '96, an incident that took a long time to resolve. After listening to that explanation, some captains became anxious, because according to them, that invasion this time had such a large size, and it was bigger than the one that had invaded in Sendai, and if it were to open up and spread its seeds, it would cause a big problem. Several captains discussed how to deal with the big problem, and a solution was found by the scientist. And in order to deal with and prevent bigger problems, they had to exterminate them before 2 p.m. But it turned out that there was another problem, because the point of their appearance was the real problem. The reason why it was a problem, because an obstructing building made it difficult for the defense forces to exterminate them. But in the midst of the confusion, a captain who was a teenager at the time, Mina Ashiro, gave a good suggestion. So, to shoot them is to use a helicopter. Shooting from the air will be very effective. Then the scientist gave an illustration of the appearance of the plant kaiju. It seems that these plant kaiju are much more troublesome than the others. With their number and size, this will be a serious problem. And not only that, Yonju and Hanju turned out that they were also there to patrol around the sump and grow very fast. Their roots spread deep into the ground, while another problem is that their trunks can grow and reach tall buildings. But amidst the anxiety and tension as the captains debated how to find effective solutions and strategies, a mocking voice was heard, and it was Narumi. Sitting casually while playing a game, he said that this meeting was very boring. Then Narumi simply explained that to solve it by just cut through the kaiju's emergence point and destroy the fruit. Charging in guns blazing is the only solution. But it turns out that Narumi's words made Mr. Hasegawa angry, because basically Narumi wasn't invited to the meeting. But Narumi showed an attitude that annoyed them, that wherever it is, it's up to him. Besides, because this room has air conditioning and a large monitor, it feels very perfect for gaming. But after that, Narumi was kicked by Mr. Hasegawa out of the room. And after that, Hasegawa apologized for the stupid boy disrupting the meeting. It is known that this first division is a gathering place for elite soldiers from all over the country, and that includes those who are candidates for captain. But that is an exception for Gen Narumi. Even though Gen Narumi is a very skilled kaiju exterminator and even the best in his class, but that's not like a Shiro Mina. Gen Narumi has a big problem with teamwork. Starting from ignoring the orders of superiors, acting at will, it's like deliberately wanting to disrupt military operations in this division. After being known as the 2nd Division's bad boy, Narumi Gen was almost dismissed. But despite his bad attitude, he was put into the 1st Division by Captain Isao. And since the death of Hikari Shinomiya, Captain Isao's priority is to build an army that has very strong abilities. But because of the boy's presence, it became a problem for the 1st Division. Mr. Hasegawa felt unlucky because Narumi's genes were always excluded from any platoon, and because of that, now he became a member, and that became a new problem now. And unexpectedly, Narumi again said something else in the middle of the meeting situation. He explained that the kaiju had a large area of appearance. Even if they mobilized the entire 1st Division, it would not cover everything. Then Narumi arrogantly stated to them, "If you need his help, just admit it." But in the end, in the midst of the commotion due to Narumi's bad attitude, Captain Isao stated that attitude, appearance, discipline, and others were not important. But Captain Isao only asked Narumi one thing: show ability and results. Narumi, who heard Captain Isao's words that it was an easy thing, Narumi likened it to an easy mode when he played the game. And sometime after that, it was time for the defense forces and others to be in a city that was invaded by kaiju with full equipment. They will head to Zone F. They will head to the place where the fruit is in the central area while eliminating all threats with other platoons. But while Mr. Hasegawa was giving instructions, Narumi was busy with his game. And sure enough, because Mr. Hasegawa was annoyed, he kicked Narumi's ass with his robot suit. Although in the end, the game Narumi played lost. Then Hasegawa asked Narumi to help him along with the other soldiers, but Narumi's response showed a refusal. But here, Hasegawa reminded him once again that the condition for dismissing him was if he caused trouble. And headquarters did not expect Narumi to give a big result on this operation. And in essence, they just wanted to see the teamwork that Narumi did. But from those words, Narumi actually lowered his head when Mr. Hasegawa said that. And it turns out that Narumi admitted that he didn't sleep well because he just bought a new game and it was so exciting that he didn't sleep. But because of that, Narumi was doubted by the other soldiers. Because of his attitude and others, they felt that Narumi would not be serious about the military operation this time. And not only that, because Narumi had a history of interfering with their missions, it also became their consideration about Narumi. Although in the end, Mr. Hasegawa just gave up and let it be entirely Narumi's decision. Whatever he did and what his future would be, it was up to him. Then at the same time, Captain Isao shouted and instructed them all to prepare to the designated position. In addition, their target was the center point of Zone D, and they had to exterminate all the kaiju. Mr. Hasegawa and the others quickly ran to get to the place, but on the way, a plant yoju with a fairly tall size blocked them. But because of their equipment and readiness, Mr. Hasegawa then destroyed the yoju with one shot. But the painful thing is that when the yoju was shot until its head was destroyed, the yoju quickly regenerated the wound. And it was just like the analysis team said. Mr. Hasegawa continued to shoot the yoju and instructed them to find the core of the yoju and destroy it immediately. After several shots were fired, they finally managed to secure the place. But unexpectedly, from behind Lord Hasegawa, a large number of yoju appeared and attacked him from behind. Some parts managed to bite the yoju. But unexpectedly, when Hasegawa was in danger, Narumi with a sword managed to cut down the yoju and shoot them in one shot. As a result, the yoju exploded and were destroyed. And you know what, guys? When Mr. Hasegawa ordered to stay on the backside, Narumi said that he was very annoyed to see them from behind. Narumi declared that he would finish off the Yonju by himself. But because of Narumi's words, it became a dispute between the two of them. But in the middle of that situation, an emergency message from the control room was heard. Unexpectedly, it turns out that the movement and development of the kaiju is accelerating. And there is a possibility that it happened earlier than the predicted time, precisely at 2 p.m. But because of that, it actually made Narumi even more excited. Now, Narumi decided to leave first, but instead of saying that, he gave orders to them to watch it from behind the city view after all the kaiju he destroyed. Narumi determinedly declared that ability and results were the most important things for the First Division. So with this, he would do everything to get perfect results. With such great skill and speed, upon arriving at the place, he immediately slashed and destroyed them in one strike. And you know what, guys? Because of Narumi's action that slaughtered severe kaiju very brutally, some people who monitored from the monitor room were so very amazed and surprised to see Narumi's action. And because now Narumi has approached the target in Zone D, it won't be long before he will meet with Honju. Then arriving at that place, Narumi was immediately distracted by a doll in the ruins of the building. He had his childhood memories of a family. The fact is, when Narumi was a child, he already had a very bad fate. He didn't even know anyone who could be called family. And the memory he remembered most was of a cityscape that was scorched to the ground. And because of that too, without any relatives or anyone, no one would accept him. Until in the end, he was placed in an orphanage. Since childhood, Narumi has had a very sad fate. There's nothing he can rely on. So inevitably, he must find the strength to survive. Ever since he was a little boy, Narumi had always shown his ability and put in the effort. His goal was results. But the bitter fact is, showing effort is more valued in this world than giving results. Even though he had gotten results, the world still didn't seem to appreciate it. And because it also made Narumi feel resentful about it until adulthood, he decided not to want to show that he had tried. And when Narumi was thinking something about what Captain Isao said, Narumi felt that now it was the opposite. He was even almost expelled from the defense force. But in the midst of the chaos in his mind, Narumi didn't hear that he was getting a call from Mr. Hasegawa. But it turns out that what Mr. Hasegawa said was very disturbing. So Narumi decides to remove the earphones and continue his mission. And when Narumi moved forward, he finally met a very large Hanju figure. Its form this time looked like a monster with a core in its stomach. And without thinking, Narumi immediately attacked the core part of the Hanju. But it wasn't easy. Several other Yoju were seen attacking Narumi. But with his skills and agility, he managed to cut down the Yoju. But with an above-average ability, Narumi managed to launch his attack right into the core of the Hanju's body until he managed to destroy it. But there was one thing that was important, guys. To complete the mission, then Narumi had to burn this plant, and after that, the mission would be completed. But apparently that remark was heard by Mr. Hasegawa. But when Narumi informed that he had defeated the Hanju, Mr. Hasegawa provided information that Narumi's prediction was wrong and the Hanju was detected alive. And sure enough, guys, the Hanju has recovered. A very interesting thing about the Hanju is that he was able to move his core organs. And after that, Narumi decided that he would kill him one more time. Without thinking, Narumi shot straight to the point where the organ was visible. But it turned out Narumi was wrong. It wasn't the core organ. The Hanju was really crazy, and now he brutally attacked Narumi, forming a very sharp weapon root from its body. The attack managed to injure Narumi and pierce his left arm through. And when Narumi was cornered, a bunch of Hanju started attacking him simultaneously. Luckily, Mr. Hasegawa came and helped Narumi to destroy them at the right time. Hasegawa was really angry that Narumi didn't listen to the attack plan that had been planned. But guys, maybe here you will be a little annoyed, but laughing, because when Mr. Hasegawa explained in detail about the Kaiju's defense and attack mechanisms, Narumi responded very annoyingly. He said that they should have told him first. And because of that, Mr. Hasegawa shouted in exasperation to Narumi that he had told him many times, but Narumi ignored him. So at the same time, Captain Isau's voice was heard. He ordered Hasegawa to report the current situation. Hasegawa then informed that they were currently facing Hanju and Yoju in the southern D-zone. And not only that, Soldier Narumi was injured and the rest of the platoon seemed unable to hold back for too long. But as Mr. Hasegawa informed Captain Isau of Narumi's poor condition, Narumi emphatically shouted that he was unhurt. Captain Isau asked them to hold their position there, stating that Captain Isau had reached Zone D, and 3 minutes after that he would be there. And because of the information that Narumi was seriously injured, it affected the other colleagues. Now, Narumi's position was so bad because of his careless attitude, but despite being so badly injured and in such a scarred state, he felt confident that there was no one stronger than him in this world. Narumi was confident that he could defeat anyone if he was serious. At least that's what he thought. Narumi recalled a moment where he had just entered the 1st Division that day, and at that moment he was immediately beaten in front of other soldiers. But feeling that he had no excuse, he felt that it was the first real defeat in his life. Narumi also felt that when he tried to fight him again and again, it was fruitless. Narumi realized that he couldn't beat him, and because of that, he would always look at him with a disappointed look. Then because of that, Narumi did something stupid. He ignored Hasegawa's orders and immediately moved to complete this mission before Captain Isao arrived. But unfortunately, because the place had been invaded by Yoju and Hanju, Narumi got a surprise attack. Although he managed to attack by shooting it, the Yoju managed to bite his left hand. Narumi's condition is now really dying. But in that moment, he remembers Captain Isao's words that he doesn't need incompetent soldiers. And all at once, Narumi looked desperate and felt that he didn't deserve this position. Then, because Mr. Hasegawa saw Narumi, who was so lethargic and lackluster, Mr. Hasegawa teased him and said, "Where is your arrogant attitude?" With a sense of desperation, Narumi stated that with the current condition, it would make him relieved because it was also the case that he would be expelled after the mission ended. But Mr. Hasegawa's answer was completely unexpected. He seemed to want to raise Narumi's spirits. He wanted to see that Narumi should show his true abilities. And not only that, Mr. Hasegawa said that he would throw away all his efforts and end up just like that. Mr. Hasegawa turned out to give a fact that he had been hiding. Narumi, who once said that he played games all night, it turned out to be a lie. because in fact, Narumi practiced secretly every night, and that was very clear. But in essence, a word was revealed stating that all this time the defense forces up to headquarters had been thinking about getting Narumi out. But there was one thing that made that not happen: Captain Isao. He always put it off to get Narumi out. Instantly from the words that made Narumi surprised. But on the other hand, he felt that it was impossible because according to Narumi, Captain Isao did not need an incompetent soldier. And while they were at odds with each other, from an unexpected direction the Honju attacked Mr. Hasegawa, but fortunately he was able to counterattack and sever the Yoju's body. And at that very moment, Mr. Hasegawa made a profound statement about his life principles. When people belittled him and looked down on him, he did everything in his power to shut them all up. And at that moment, no one dared to look down on him. That's what Mr. Hasegawa told Narumi. But suddenly, information came to light that a large group of Yoju were heading towards the location where Narumi and Hasegawa were. Without thinking, Mr. Hasegawa immediately attacked the Yoju and asked Narumi to show all his skills if he felt that he was great. Now, the situation was worsening. Even though Narumi and Hasegawa continued to attack the Yoju, their appearance was increasing. Narumi was now surrounded and attacked by a group of Yoju. But instantly he recalled what Captain Isao had said: "I don't need incompetent soldiers." But it suddenly showed an unexpected event. When the situation was getting more and more desperate, Narumi gave a huge attack and destroyed them. But unfortunately, it wasn't over yet. That bunch of Yoju kept coming and attacking them. One by one, the Yoju were annihilated by Narumi. A very epic scene was shown by Narumi. With a single weapon, he stood on the head of Hasegawa and slaughtered them with a single weapon. And the fact that it was so shocking. When Mr. Hasegawa found out that Narumi shot right at his core organs, it was very unlikely, according to Mr. Hasegawa. After Narumi managed to slaughter them all, he felt a pain in his head. And immediately we see a change in Narumi's eyes. It can be concluded that the results of Narumi's experiments on the kaiju body seem to have reacted, and it is shown by a difference when he sees objects through his eyes. Ichi-Kaiju is a clairvoyant kaiju that causes tremendous damage with the ability to predict enemy attacks. The oldest numbered weapon in Japan made from his retinal cells, and it is the Ichi-Kaiju weapon. And it turned out that the weapon showed a high level of synchronization with Narumi's cells. But because he was so confused by Narumi's movements, Hasegawa felt that every shot always hit and destroyed their core organs. The attack was completely unavoidable. The attitude was the same as Intel's Ichi-Kaiju. The situation had now turned into a stroke of luck, as it seemed Narumi had gained his powers. So since it only took 1 minute before Captain Isao arrived, he declared that he would take care of them all before Captain Isao showed up. Although his left hand was badly injured, Narumi seemed to be able to use the weapon with just one hand. But when Narumi moved on his own, Mr. Hasegawa no longer held him back, and now he was actually supporting him. He ordered several other soldiers to give way to Narumi. The perspective towards Narumi was now completely reversed in Mr. Hasegawa's mind. Where once he would always rebel if put at the back, now he would be liberated if he wanted to be at the front. And when Narumi saw some of the Yoju emerging from a rooftop, his eyes showed a clear picture of where the core of the Yoju was. Without thinking, he immediately fired at all of them, and in the end, it was fruitless. They kept popping up, and there was no end to them. Then in the distance came the voice of Mr. Hasegawa. He had seen something, and it seemed to be their core organ. But when Narumi looked through his eyes, it wasn't the core organ. It was just a decoy, and the real core organ would produce a collection of electrical signals. And when an explosion occurred under the building, they finally found the original core organ. The core organ opened up, and instantly Narumi could see everything and shoot it. And in the end, because of Narumi's eyes and abilities, they managed to defeat the Honju and successfully remove the vital signs on their bodies. But it turns out that Captain Isao is already in that place and sees what Narumi has done. He says that it's not over because there are still other Yoju, but instead we see a very annoying expression from Narumi. He says that Captain Isao is slow because he's destroyed everything. But because Narumi was so confident and so proud when he managed to exterminate the kaiju, he told Captain Isao that he should thank him. But Captain Isao responded that it was the Defense Force's job, and what Narumi did was what they were supposed to do. Then in the end, Mr. Hasegawa tried to say the previous thing, that Captain Isao was the first to confront headquarters to prevent them from removing Narumi. and I'm sure he appreciates your strength more than anyone. But because it made Narumi so big-headed, he felt that Captain Isao really wanted Narumi to stay there. Narumi, with an attitude that seemed arrogant and dismissive towards Captain Isao, ended up angering Mr. Hasegawa. He hit Narumi on the head, leaving a bump. However, in the midst of their argument, Mr. Hasegawa suddenly remembered that Narumi was a child without a home. There were no memories of siblings or anything else. The truth was that he was a child raised by an orphanage, and because of this, Mr. Hasegawa stated that Narumi couldn't even find his place in the defense force. But with what he had done and the results he achieved, everything had changed. Narumi, sitting with a relieved smile, said that finally, now he could stay in the defense force. And because of this, Narumi looked happy. A few days later, we see Mr. Hasegawa in a room looking upset and in a hurry. With an angry expression, he seemed to be searching for Narumi. But suddenly, Mr. Hasegawa received a report about the appearance of a kaiju in the Katsushika area. He asked for the coordinates and immediately headed to the location. It turned out that recently, there had been a series of unresolved kaiju incidents since last month. Strangely, the kaiju disappeared before the defense forces could respond to civilian reports. But it was all due to suspicions about Kaiju number 9, which had made the situation more complicated lately. Mr. Hasegawa contacted the monitoring room and asked where Narumi was now, because in the current situation, they couldn't just sit around at the base and needed to act immediately. However, it turned out that the monitoring room had already informed Mr. Hasegawa that they had sent the information, but there was no response from Narumi. A little annoyed, Mr. Hasegawa wondered to himself what that foolish Narumi was actually doing. Not long after that, Mr. Hasegawa and the other troops immediately headed to the location where the kaiju appeared. But unexpectedly, Narumi had already defeated the kaiju and was sitting casually on top of its head. "You're so late, Hasegawa. I've already taken them all down, including the Yoju." That's the first thing Narumi said when he saw Hasegawa arrive at the scene. Hasegawa stated that Narumi should have at least reported before taking action. But after seeing that Narumi was able to handle it all by himself, he was impressed with his performance. After finishing off the kaiju, Narumi mentioned that he had stayed up all night playing video games. But it turned out that Hasegawa knew everything, that Narumi hadn't actually stayed up all night, but had instead been wearing the Kaiju uniform and training in the training room. Narumi was suddenly shocked by what Hasegawa said because he knew. But as usual, Narumi always looks for excuses to maintain his arrogant attitude. According to Hasegawa, back when Narumi was a teenager and defeated a kaiju, he claimed he left because he forgot a toy at the orphanage. But the truth is, that toy wasn't his. It actually belonged to a child at the orphanage. In essence, Narumi always lies and covers up what really happened. It could be said that he doesn't want to show his true self. Then we see Kikoru contacting Narumi and informing him that she has defeated everyone. Because of that, Kikoru wants to remind Narumi of his promise to fight her. Immediately, Hasegawa asks Narumi, "Are you nervous about Kikoru's increased speed and strength?" But Narumi's response is always the same. He arrogantly claims that he is the strongest and never feels nervous. That answer actually makes Mr. Hasegawa laugh. But if you observe, Kikoru is the daughter of Captain Isao. Kikoru's fighting style is inherited from Captain Isao. Hasegawa looks at Narumi and assumes that, overall, the person who most resembles Isao is Narumi. But before it could be answered that it is Narumi, Narumi looks at Mr. Hasegawa and asks what he sees. Then in the end, Narumi walks while recalling the recent problem regarding the case of the missing kaiju. It is clearly a sign of the catastrophe caused by that kaiju, because it won't be long before that kaiju will lead its troops to attack. And essentially, with the impending bad situation, they have been preparing for it for a long time. And this is the reason Captain Isao reminded the young people to be able to face it. And now that power continues to be built in each division, with several special weapons already possessed by some of the defense forces, such as Hoshina, Mina, Kikoru, Kafka, and Narumi. Their struggle will now begin to face that kaiju, or it could be said, Kaiju number 9. And finally, Kaiju Side B, the end. Oh yeah, if you want to watch the previous chapters, you can check out the Kaiju Side B playlist on this channel. I'm Nim, like and subscribe, see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.